Hi, this is Dr. Michelle, and I want to welcome you to today's segment of Tab Talks. And today we're going to be discussing Courtney's story. And Courtney Cox was an amazing woman, is an amazing woman who led an amazing life that ended too soon. And today we are going to be celebrating Courtney's life and our hope in doing so that we can save someone else. And I'm so glad to welcome to today's show Courtney's mother, Barbara Mebane. Hey, Barbara, how are you today?
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
It is always a pleasure, Barbara, to be with you. I've known Barbara a long time. And so this is a story that just hits close to home and to my heart. So I want to thank Barbara for joining us today. I admire your courage for coming on to tell Courtney's story. And when we were discussing Courtney to prepare for today's show, you commented that it was a delight raising her and that she wanted you to be proud of her. Do you mind sharing with the audience just what you meant by that?
Well, I'll first start by saying that telling Courtney's story is something that I feel compelled to do, not only because she was amazing, but because also storytelling is healing, which is something that I've learned that telling your story can be healing. And I'm still in that process. And I know that I will always be in that process. I'm coming to understand that grief is like a heavy backpack, and you just adjust and learn to carry it better as time goes on. So I just wanted to open with the thoughts and the idea that, I'm hopefully healing myself and hopefully can help heal someone else through what I share. But Courtney was a delight to raise in that, first of all, she was a surprise. Her very existence was a joy, because doctors told me that I would not have children, and I had, pretty much accepted that. I was 39 when I discovered that I was having Courtney, and just thrilled. I mean, basically, I was breathing on 40. she she became my joy from the moment she was born. She was a beautiful child outwardly, but internally she was just such a beautiful person, and that just isn't my interpretation of her. It is what I've learned, and even more so recently, from those whose lives she impacted. And whatever she did, she always strived for excellence. And I remember I would drive her to school, and we would always, when she was a little girl in lower school, practice her spelling words, because it was her goal every week to get 100 on that spelling test. And she did. She really endured me being a helicopter mom, because I had nothing else to do. I loved this. I couldn't believe it was happening to me. And I just really wanted to make sure that I was fully present in her life. And even though I was a helicopter mom, I stressed the need for her to be independent, so that, she would always be able to take care of herself. And I think part of that boosted her confidence, and which made it very easy for her to, after graduating from college, decide that I think I want to live in France for a year, because she was fluent in France. She went to an international high school, and they started traveling, I believe, in the 5th grade. And she's had that travel bug ever since. And France was one of her favorite places. But she lived in France for a year, teaching English there. And I think one of her proudest moments of me being proud of her is when we took a trip to France together. And she is so fluent that, the French thought that she was one of them. And I'm like, no, 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 she's mine. So she was just a joy. She was really, I called her my sidekick. And we just shared so many commonalities like reading and, the love of the arts and, of course, eating out. And she loved gourmet food and making it herself. I had never watched, say, for example, the Food Channel until Courtney started me watching the Food Channel. So from her, I learned a great deal myself, and that was always exciting. And one of the things that stands out that we did was one of our last trips before COVID said you aren't going anywhere was to the African American Museum of History in Washington. So that's one thing. Another thing I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to
share that with her.
Experience that with her, and we had such a great time. And then we got on another train and went to see my college roommate, whom she had not met, who lives in Severna Park, Maryland, and spent time there. And so it was a great girls' trip.
It's going to be hard for me to get through this. Okay. Courtney's life ended too soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I want people to know that you are still grieving that traumatic loss. Do you mind sharing with the audience what happened to Courtney?
Courtney was, well, I'd never thought I'd be, saying any of this. I'd never thought I'd be living in this world without her. I always was in my mind thinking, I hope when I go, she's strong enough and, that kind of thing. And I wanted her to be independent and ready and, making her own money and all that. But here I am. God had another plan. I was used to us being separated by miles, but this distance now is, any parent would tell you that has gone through this, totally different. But Courtney was killed while she was living in Atlanta. She was shot and killed in her sleep by a man that she had recently started seeing. I feel that it was a fairly new relationship, perhaps less than 6 months. And this happened this past October 20th of 2021. She had come home the weekend of my birthday. My birthday was on the 17th, and my birthday was on the 18th, and she came home actually on the 16th to go up to her father's to celebrate her grandmother's passing, and they did a balloon toss and that kind of thing. Her grandmother's birthday was 2 days before mine. And so her grandmother and I always did celebrate. So she was home that weekend. And before coming home, she asked if this person could accompany her to the events for my birthday. And of course, he went to her grandmother's events. And I said yes. And she had sent a picture of him during that conversation. And when I saw the picture, I was stunned because he frightened me. The way he looked, very nice looking person, but there was something about him that the word thug came to mind. So at any rate, she came to one event for my birthday, and we noticed then that this was not good. And then she came to my home. We had another event, and he was worse. And they left and went back to Atlanta on that Tuesday. And we text again, and never really had the chance to talk to her about this.
Police. Officers responded to the 21st floor of Cox high-rise apartment around 3:15 this morning and found Jarrett shooting from the balcony.
I guess when the police got there, there was a standoff and the police killed him. But Courtney was already gone. So that's what happened. And I feel, she always said I was her security blanket, but I was nowhere around to save her, and never had the opportunity to talk to her like I wanted to, because I knew it had to be a very careful conversation, because I didn't want to make her feel that she needed to be closer to him. You know how sometimes it can be, if you are against something, your child might go the other way. And that's what happened to Courtney.
Why? Access to a gun makes it 5 times more likely that a woman will be killed by her abusive partner. We know that half of the female victims of intimate partner homicide in the United States are killed with a gun. In an average month, at least 55 American women are shot and killed by an intimate partner. And many more are injured. We forget about that. We have people in our organization who are victims, still alive, in very, very dire situations. Several have been paralyzed, and others have suffered all other kinds of issues. We know that nearly 1 million women in the U.S. who are alive today have been shot or shot at by an intimate partner. And you know something? This is very important. Abusers not only kill their partners, they often take the lives of family, friends, co-workers, law enforcement officers. That's why it usually takes, if I'm not mistaken, 3 officers to respond to a domestic violence call.
I know that Courtney attended Spelman College. She was a scholar, and then she would go on to Georgetown Law School. So that to me is evidence that she was a scholar. And while she was in law school, she actually chose to participate in the International Women's Human Rights Clinic, where she represented 2 Tanzanian women who were in abusive marriages. What we do know is that abuse knows no station in life. It knows no ethnicity. It can happen to anyone. When did you discover that Courtney wasn't okay? Was it that visit?
It was that visit. It was that visit. After we met the killer, we were, because it was a celebratory weekend, there were lots of people, not lots, but at the event on Sunday, there were probably 10 people at a dinner party. And she brought him, and it was just totally evident that he was not who she should be with. He appeared highly intoxicated or drugged. He seemed very much in his own world. It was very difficult to converse with him. He almost mumbled. On the second occasion, when they came to the home, he was actually even worse. It may be even higher or more intoxicated, to the point that they had to leave. But the last thing she said to me that night was, "I'm okay, Mom." And one thing, she never wanted me to worry about anything. But that was the last thing she said to me that night. When she got back to where they were staying, she texted and said they were back and they would leave on a later flight on Tuesday than they had planned. But earlier in the day on Sunday, usually when Courtney comes home, she divides the time up very evenly between her father and me. And this time, she didn't come to the house at all, except for the Monday when we had a celebration here. And when I questioned her about that on Sunday for that event, I said, well, are you not, basically coming home? And she says, oh no, we're coming to the party. And I said, well, because then I'm thinking this is definitely not my daughter, because she had shared things that she wanted to eat, or things she wanted me to have on hand, which I always did. And I asked her then, I said, is this man going to come between us? And she said, oh no, absolutely not. And she said, but I'll be over. But of course she didn't come over, because she said she had to work, and she did always have a lot of work. So I said, okay, but I didn't buy that. I did not know she was in this kind of trouble until we actually saw him, his condition, and that kind of thing. So I didn't know. I did know.
Now, you did share with us that you, of course, had seen her a couple of days before she was murdered, and there was something unsettling about him, and it certainly unsettled you. And at that time, you said she was working from home, because of the pandemic. What insights do you think that you can share? Did the sheltering in place isolate her even more? Do you think that there was any impact
Yes, I
because of
do.
COVID to this tragedy?
I do. One thing I was able to share with her when she sat down to dinner on the 17th, we were out at a restaurant for the group of us, and she sat next to me, and I shared with her, I said, oh, I will be so happy when you are able to be with your friends, your professional friends. And she had started a women's group of attorneys, of African American Black attorneys, who got together to share the challenges that they were going through in corporate law. So she had lots of good close contacts with really solid people. She loved working from home. She always did, even before COVID. But with that, she had an active social life, with her friends. Prior, she'd been, to use it for lack of a better term, single. She'd been in a long-term relationship, I think 6, 7, 8 years from college, and that dissolved. And at one point she came home. This was probably last year around Mother's Day. She said, oh, I'm ready to date. And we talked about online dating, and she had gone on some online dates, that kind of thing. So I knew she was she had healed from the breakup and was ready to move on. But I think that this person living in her building made it very convenient, to form a relationship, I would say. That total isolation and not being in a group. I do know there were people, I learned later, who met him, but the diagnosis always came back the same one that I saw. They couldn't believe that she was with someone like this. And I'm thinking, had she not been so isolated and so lonely, she wouldn't have given him the time of day. But she didn't talk a lot about him to me. And I think because she knew in her heart that I wouldn't like him. And she told her friends, I don't think my mom's gonna like him.
Okay, by all measures, Courtney was extremely intelligent. And they used to talk to me about her all the time, and she's well versed. So what happened to her could really happen to anyone, because it had nothing to do with how learned she was.
No.
We know that women in all stations can find themselves in abusive relationships. How have you reconciled the enormity of how your life has changed?
I don't know that I've reconciled it. I know that I am a work in progress, leaning on my faith, my family, my beau, Wade, friends, sorority sisters, grief literature, and definitely my therapist. And I want to encourage anyone to, I didn't have a therapist before this, but I do now. And I want to encourage anyone who is going through something to, take account of your own mental health, even with your faith. So I don't know that I reconciled it outside of my biblical reading and faith reading. I discovered just by accident, I was looking at a talk show and Michelle Hord, Hord, was on, and she has written the book The Other Side of Yet, Finding Light in the Midst of Darkness. And she's a Black woman who was, I believe, a NBC Universal producer. And she chronicles her journey of finding light after her ex-husband killed their 7-year-old daughter. It also was her only child. And she shared that the book of Job became her anchor. And in particular, the verse, though he slay me, yet I will trust him. And that is indicative in the title of the book. The yet is the other side. I find, and I actually wrote to her and she responded because I found the things that she had to say were very much in line with my own thinking, in terms of my life would never be as it was before, but yet there has to be something before me that will carry me through. And that is what I know Courtney would want. She always thought I was strong. When I was working on my doctorate, she was, the biggest supporter when I've had those days of, I don't know if I can do this. Oh, yes, you can, Mom, And she'd always say to me, oh, I got you, Mom. I got you, Mom. And I know that now my life's work will be to see that her legacy lives through her scholarship. Her law firm, Paul Hastings, started a scholarship in her honor for young women who are at Spelman who are interested in international studies and law. So the name of it is the Courtney C. Cox Endowed Scholarship class. She was in the class of 2012. She was 31 years old when she died, and this is her birthday month. And so I'm very happy to talk about her this month. But I don't know, Michelle, that I've reconciled. I'm in that work in progress.
As a mother, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to grasp the enormity of your grief, and yet it's simply inconceivable. And you shared with me that she loved life, and for that you're pushing forward.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found that has supported you emotionally through this trauma?
First and foremost, I had to acknowledge that Courtney would be devastated if I were to give up. Wade, my beau of over 10, 12 years, has been a support beyond measure in every way. He himself is the father of 2 daughters, and without experiencing the pain that I am at the level that I am, he gets it. So he has just been the rock of Gibraltar. So a lot of my support system has been people like my sister, one of her cousins, all went with me to Atlanta to close her apartment and to make that, that was just the most horrible, traumatic thing ever. because it was where she was killed. The place had been, cleaned and that kind of thing, but it was still a mess. So those close relationships have been helpful. Ironically, and I guess maybe God planned it this way, a couple with whom Wade and I have been friends with since our 20s were in Indianapolis for my birthday, and they were here on the morning that I received that call that no parent wants to receive, and they held me up through, all of this. There are through thick and thin friends for sure. And they opened their home to us for Christmas so that I would be in a different environment for my first Christmas ever. Not ever, because when she was in France, she didn't come home. But, without her living presence somewhere in my life. And then another important aspect of Courtney's, of this whole thing has been the participation of Courtney Spellman's sisters. One should never, ever underestimate the power of the Spellman sisterhood or the Morehouse brotherhood. On that very day, those were some of the first people who got to me. One of her Morehouse brothers was the first person to have food delivered to the house. They were here in full force for her service. And it goes the same for her international high school friends who were all here and, spoke at the funeral, and even people from St. Richard's, her very first school. So, I don't want to not acknowledge that those two institutions, those three, the schools she went to were like small schools, family schools, and people care very deeply for one another. And I saw that firsthand. In fact, her Spellman sisters and Spellman brothers I'm in conjunction with them planning something for her birthday. It's like, what are we going to do for Courtney's birthday? They said. And then I got on board to do whatever they wanted me to do for her birthday. So it's been a lot of people who understood or understand how much I adored this child. Not that I'm indifferent from any other parent, but I simply adored her because she was such a joy, such a good person. And her friends told me that while they were here, one of her high school friends held a little reception at her home after we had a reception, and then there was I guess in old school language that might be an after set, but they had an after set at Danielle's, and they told me that everyone there thought Courtney was their best friend. That was the kind of impact she had on people. Mm-hmm. She was a very nice, giving person.
I remember going to the service, and you're absolutely right. People just kept coming, and they just kept coming. And I thought, this building is not going to be able to hold all these people. And they just kept coming and coming. And every person that said anything about her, you're right. I was like, she's got a building full of best friends, because that's just how impactful she was on the people that knew her. I know you're a Christian. Or you're very open about your faith, and I know that you love the Lord. How has your faith sustained you?
Well, after this happened, of course, you have the normal things that you read and do, and but my mother sent me a beautiful devotional book titled The Beloved Psalms, and it contains morning and evening devotions that confirm and reaffirm that God knows what I'm going through. And the morning devotionals are especially helpful because when Courtney was alive, she was the first person with whom I would have communication in the morning. She would look forward to me sending her some kind of little, what do they call, picture or GIF, and some kind of happy Tuesday, happy Monday, good morning, She loved that. so she and I would communicate first in the mornings. And now I don't have that, but I have this beautiful book of devotions. And, through the Psalms, I've learned that God, is by my side, and his love isn't dependent on my particular situation. He loves me regardless. And he instructs us through the Psalms that grief is present even during happiness. And that simply means that word bittersweet would best define that, because I can be so happy about something. And the way the author described it through Psalms is that, whenever you're happy and these tears well up in your eyes, that's your grief coming through. But grief and tears especially, are healing. And then in Psalms 34:18, it says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he rescues those whose spirits are crushed. And I thought that was meant for me, and I know it's meant for the world, but those are the kind of things that that pull me through. And I can go back and read that time and time again, and especially the devotional on grief is present even in happiness. So it's leaning on God's word. And that's not to say that I haven't questioned, why did she have to die such a violent death, when all I ever did all my life was try to protect her. And that doesn't mean that I don't have questions. And from what I've read, God expects us to have questions, but to still have faith. So that is pretty much where I am right now. And Courtney had an amazing service. The speaker, Pastor Jones, has been just a wonderful support system as well.
What did you find most helpful? I'm sure when people reached out to you, it's one thing when someone passes away, but when someone's murdered, I'm sure it's very awkward because you just don't know what to say. What thoughts can you share with someone out there who's watching, to educate family and friends to support someone through their grief? What was helpful? What was not?
Well, I think I was shell-shocked because you mentioned that you and I spoke, and I don't even remember at Courtney's service. But I will say that, and I've heard this before, that after all the busyness of planning for the service and the committal and acknowledging those who you need to by sending thank you notes, all of that keeps you a little bit busy. But then after that time, it can be very, very lonely. So I would suggest, you stay in touch through a call or a text, offer an afternoon or evening out. One of the things, and this is what many people said, including my mother, she said, I just don't know what to say. And it's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but I can imagine, and some can imagine, the depth of your grief and your feeling and your loss. So it's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but this is what I want to do if it will be helpful. And I appreciate it. In my case, it made national television. I was bombarded with calls, just almost as soon as I got the news from people on the news in Atlanta and so forth. But in my case, no one asked me the details of what happened. I wouldn't have been able to cope with that. And then also in my case, my friend who was here from Savannah, she stayed the whole week, flew home, and then she and her husband came back again. And Wade was here to filter calls. So if you can have someone to filter your calls, not necessarily filter them, but a lot of people would call and say, well, what can I do? And he could talk to them about, um, what to do. And I had one friend who she made it her business to make sure every day something was delivered to eat. Gone are the days when, your counter is filled with food that's spoiling and, all that kind of thing.
Yes.
So, people just who knew me well enough, knew what I would appreciate at some point. But I want to emphasize it's the thought that counts, and keeping in touch by text. And text is such a lovely thing because you can talk, so to speak, but you don't feel that you're intruding on someone's privacy when they don't really want to talk.
Well, you have chosen to celebrate Courtney's life by creating a scholarship in her name. Do you mind sharing the details with us and how people can contribute?
Well, actually, it was Courtney's law firm. I mean, as soon as it happened, almost, they told me, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then we're also starting a scholarship with a gift of $35,000. And the goal was for it to be an endowed scholarship. We had to reach donation. We had to reach 50,000. Well, when I last checked a month or so ago, or got the report, it is now at 80,000. So it's over endowed, and our goal is to continue to fundraise and keep it going, because that's how we keep her legacy going. It will be it won't be eligible for distribution for maybe a year, maybe two, because the money, the scholarships will simply come from the interest of the money. So the money needs a minute to grow. So we're going to allow that, of course, to happen. And I do have information on, and again, as I said earlier, it is targeted for women who are interested in international law, and not international law per se, but international studies and law. Courtney was a double major in international studies and French. And she studied in Martinique, Morocco, Spain, just, she everywhere. She and the young man she used to date, they went everywhere. They would go places and we'd be like, well, where's that? We'd have to get the map out to see where it was. But
So if everyone just looks at the donating to Spelman College and Women in International Law, and then you can make those checks payable to 350 Spelman Lane, Southwest, Box 1303, Atlanta, Georgia, 30314. And then we'll also put the link, the URL for online donations as well for the Courtney Cox Memorial Scholarship Fund. Wow. So you also support several agencies, because you did tell me about that, to assist women who are in unhealthy relationships. How have those agencies inspired you, and what takeaways can you give the audience?
Well, donations in Courtney's name, when we were preparing her service, we asked for, in lieu of flowers, for people to consider donating either to her scholarship fund or to domestic abuse agencies here in Indy, Atlanta, or wherever you happen to live. We had people here that I know of. Of course, I didn't know so many people were there. I think they told us over 1,000 people watched online, like 1,500 people watched online, and from 3 different countries abroad. So wherever you are, you can always help women. But donations in her name have been made to Coburn House here in Indianapolis, Alternatives in Anderson, Indiana, which is where her dad's family lives, and the Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence in Atlanta. I'm inspired by the women who take the risk to leave. Many live in fear of being found or their children being found and harmed. Um, Women in abusive backgrounds come from very diverse um, back backgrounds. You just can't pinpoint who is and who isn't based on socioeconomic status. Um, in fact, when Will Smith, and I'm not saying he's an abuser, but when he made this statement that love makes you do crazy things, my immediate thought at that time was, that's in my mind something that an abuser would say. I'm not accusing him of that, but just that line, oh, I did it because I loved you. I did it because, I wanted to keep you close to me. So I'm inspired by women who um, have the guts to leave and not, the key thing is not to return. And I have come to understand that while women who are in an alliance with an agency, yes, they need, we think immediately, oh, I'll donate clothing or household goods or, things they need to get set up again. And they do need those things. But these agencies also need funding to support programs that will help abuse women and make them more productive as citizens, confident citizens. They need career development, dress for success kind of instruction. They need especially counseling for themselves and for their children for the aftermath of having been in an abusive relationship, and to be able to see the signs again if they were to appear.
Well, April the 21st will be Courtney's birthday. Can you share with us what you have planned?
Yes, as I speak, her Spellman sisters and Morehouse brothers are hosting. First, I know the Spellman sisters are going to, on Thursday, her birthday's Thursday, the 21st, there'll be a Zoom gathering that I don't have the link to yet, but that will happen on her actual birthday. And then guests will be asked to donate $32 to her scholarship fund, or any denomination of $32. And then on Saturday, the 23rd, we're going to Atlanta. And the first part of that day will be filled with fun things like paint, sip, and socialize, and top golf for people who, maybe there were some guys who didn't want to paint a rose, because we're painting a rose, and we're naming it the Camille Rose, because Courtney's name was Courtney Camille Cox. And so, all who want to paint can paint, but if you don't want to paint, you can go to Top Golf. And then, we've planned everything to be in just one location except for the Top Golf, so people aren't having to, go all over town for things. But in the evening, then we will have an actual celebration of sorts with, good food, music, and speaker time. We want it to be, of course, a happier time than when we were all last together in October at her service. We know that it will be bittersweet, but it's helping me to and them to get through the first year. Her birthday was a big deal. She always loved celebrating her birthday, and when she was younger, we'd do it for a month with her godmother Kathy, and we would just take the whole month. So her birthday was always a big deal, and her 30th was to have been a big deal, and she we had planned a great celebration, and of course, because of COVID, we had to cancel twice. So we never were able to have it. So I'm hoping that this, if she's looking down from heaven, knows that mom's got me. She's having something for me. She loved to have a good time, and I think I told you that Courtney studied hard. She was a very hard worker, had a strong work ethic, and she played hard. She played real hard. And that usually meant taking some exotic trips. She loved to do that. And, being with friends and socializing. She never met a stranger. And the unique thing about Courtney, she was very she didn't judge people, at all, because of, if you were, say, not a law school graduate or not even a college graduate, that didn't matter to Courtney.
Mattered to her.
No, if you were a cool person, and I'm thinking maybe in that respect is why she also took on, this person, thinking maybe she could fix him. I don't know. Those are answers I'll never have.
Yeah.
But that was the kind of person she was.
I always give my guests the last word, and I've been calling you Barbara Mebane because I've known you so long, but I certainly want people to know that you're Dr. Barbara Mebane, and you set that example and you set that bar high for Courtney. So I'm not surprised that she became the scholar, the friend, and the person that she is, because she had an amazing example of that. What thoughts do you want to leave with us? And I just, again, want to thank you for just sharing more about Courtney, because I think the world needs more Courtneys. And, it's definitely a life gone too soon. But what do you want to share with our audience?
Well, everyone who knows me, and now the audience knows, that Courtney was and remains the love of my life. I absolutely adored her. I was happiest personally myself during her 31 years on earth. The 31 years I had with her were amazing. We had just such a good time. She was really my miracle baby. But yet I've come to understand that grief is the price we pay for love. And even in the Psalms, it tells us that the greater the love, the greater the grief. And in my case, more than anything, I wish I had the opportunity to talk to Courtney about the man who took her life. So for anyone listening, it's like, if you see something or feel something, say something, because I never got to. And I also want to say, I won't be screaming it here, but very loudly, because the first thing abusers do is try to separate your child from his or her family. And that's one question I was able to ask her: is this man going to come between us? And that's all I ever got to ask. But I sensed that. I just knew this wasn't good. The way she just didn't even, stayed at the hotel, didn't even come home. And in closing, I would also like to ask you to continue to pray for me and all mothers and fathers who are going through this kind of grief and loss and loneliness. Thank you so much for having me, Michelle, and thank you for allowing me to share Courtney's story.
Thank you, Barbara. It's been a pleasure, and you're always in my prayers.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask everyone in our audience to keep you in their prayers as well.
Thank you so much.